I wanted to say hello to everyone and welcome you, and thank you for being here in this workshop that we hope will provide something useful for you and your work. And we are very, very glad to share some of our reflections in the framework of such an interesting international event like this summit, which is, as we are seeing these days, full of experiences, of knowledge, of inspiring examples that will provide, I'm sure, and are providing important food for our thoughts and practices. So yeah, we are very, very happy to be here. I would like to introduce myself first. I am Júlia Pàmias from Barcelona, but living in and working in Italy for the last 8 years. And I work with Defense for Children International Italy as a researcher and as a project coordinator. Defense for Children, I will just say some few words about our organization, just for you to get oriented with who are you talking about with. It's a child rights international movement with more than 40 national sections spread around the world, which are independent and grassroots. In Italy, we are based in Genoa, but we work nationally, and we focus our activities on research, analysis, training, advocacy, and development and testing of innovative models of social intervention. And in particular, we work a lot in the fields of migration, juvenile justice, child protection, and education on human rights. But today we are here in connection with one of our projects, which is called Regeneration, and I don't know if you were here today this morning. My colleague Pippo Costella was presenting this project and the approach this morning in his keynote. This is an ongoing project aimed at promoting social inclusion of young migrant caregivers, from 18 years to 21 years, through social mentoring. And so the mentors are volunteer adult citizens from, let's say, around 30 years to 65 years, more or less, and that decide to accompany the path, the growing path of young migrant people for a period of their life. And this project is co-funded by the AMIF program of the European Union, and it's supported by the Never Alone Foundation. It directly involves 3 countries, Italy, Greece, and Spain. So we are now at the half of the project implementation, and we have already activated these new mentoring programs in Genoa, the city of Genoa in Italy, and Thessaloniki, which is a city in Greece. And these programs are involving young migrant people who came alone to Europe as unaccompanied minors, and that recently left the child reception system because they turned 18. So they are facing some common challenges, but of course they are unique and their experiences are very different. And as you will see, we will propose this target group as a case study for our workshop. So we will refer often to this particular group to propose an application of the notions that we will share during our session. But before proceeding, I would like to also give the floor to my colleague Alba, and she will introduce also herself and the organization she works with, which is Punta Referencia, that is part of the project as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Julia. I'm Alba. I'm a social worker in Punta Referencia. We are working with caregivers, youngsters, accompany them through their emancipation path. And we've been working during more than 20 years in mentoring projects. So we are now in that European project training and helping Greece and Italy to launch those mentoring projects. And yeah, and this is a bit our role here, and we are glad to be here with Julia with this approach, with new approach of human rights. So before starting, as Julia has said, as we are going to be focused on this session with the target group we are working with, which are migrant caregivers, we would like to just, probably most of you may know about them, And as Julia has said, they are all unique, and we have even in Spain, Greece, and Italy, we have different contexts, but there's some similarities and some things they have in common. So we wanted just to give you a few overview of who they are. So when we put the cases, you will know more about who is our target group. So they are all caregivers after 18 that need to face the chance of becoming emancipated quicker than the rest of the population. So they have been, or they are through a migration process. They have a lack of positive adult reference, a poor knowledge of the context, a precarious status. They may have difficulties to accessing resources and services. They are committed with their future, and they are willing to create network of friends and reference adults. And they are also, they have a lot of capacity to learn, and they have a lot of capacity to adapt and overcome the challenge they face. Sorry. So from this first introduction, we'll start our workshop that is more focused on the approach of human rights with this target group that we are working with.
Our project is interacting with all these aspects and conditions. These are all elements present in different ways and intensity in all of our local contexts and of your countries maybe as well, I suppose. And that, of course, needs to be taken into account when we are developing responses like mentoring. So how can we think about supporting mentoring relationships without considering the characteristics of our systems, and as well as the dysfunctionalities of our system, the structural conditions that generate problems of social exclusion and situations of extreme fragility or vulnerability. So our proposal for this workshop is actually to explain a possible way to use human rights, not only as a legal tool, but also as a system, as a platform, as a device to operationalize and earn mentoring. We believe that mentoring is an extremely powerful tool for social change. And we conceive mentoring not only as a process that benefits the mentee, but as a circular dynamic that affects also mentors and the surrounding context. And through mentoring, we can achieve change, we can achieve social, political, cultural change, personal change. And we are proposing this platform of human rights proposes us as a common framework of reference to give also meaning and sense and orientation to it. Now I just wanted to connect with this dimension and let us share some considerations that explain why it's important for us to consider the biographies of people and what this has to do with the human rights approach that it's what we are going to propose today. So first of all, I would like to highlight that connecting with our biography during learning processes, so when we are providing training, for example, to our mentors or mentees, is a very effective way to open a channel of communication between theory and practice. There is a difference between receiving information and understanding it and processing it, interiorizing it. So we believe that relating the notions we receive with our own personal experience helps at giving sense and meaning to these notions. Another aspect that I would like to mention is that talking about biographies means also talking about our human dimension, regardless of our professional role, regardless of our social class, of our mandate as professionals, or regardless of our age, of our origins. So puts the human dimension at the front of the interaction, and putting this at the front of our interaction is putting something that all of us share, which is our story, but that is different for everyone. So means giving space also to the centrality, to to the uniqueness of our stories. And this is very much linked with considering the centrality of the person, of his or her needs, of his or her expectations, his potentials, which is the core notion of human rights approach, considering the diversity of each individual, and also to avoid the standardization of proposals. And mentoring has a lot to do with this, because it's about creating individual relationships, interpersonal relationships, which are unique. So if we talk about mentoring, and this is the last aspect I wanted to, the reflection linked to the biographical approach that I wanted to share, that we must be aware about how mentoring relationships also, and therefore the encounter between two stories, can change those biographies, but can also have a broader impact in the surrounding context. This relation between the individual dimension and the collective dimension is also represented both in the human rights perspective and in the idea of mentoring. Think about, for example, the voice of a group of mentors, the mentor collective or the mentees collective, or think about how powerful could be the voice of a network of mentoring organizations. So yesterday, in the welcome speech, I remember that someone was talking about privilege and about power dynamics, and according to the human rights approach, mentoring would not represent unidirectional action, so would not repropose so these power dynamics that are present in our system, but would represent a more complex multidirectional interaction that responds to an exercise of active citizenship. It's not that someone with more experience teaches or guides someone with less experience. It's not just this, but it's an action of active citizenship, of civil commitment, of democratic engagement, no? Serving human development, let's say, and contributing to the interest of the persons involved, yes, but also to the larger community. So this is what a human rights perspective can propose to our mentoring programs. But when we talk about human rights, what are we talking about? I mean, where they come from? What exactly, from where they emerge? We know that very often human rights are seen as very abstract conception, no? Or even as a rhetoric that is very far from our daily lives, or that has little to do with our personal situation. It is seen either like something related with activism or with legal issues, but human rights can constitute a multidisciplinary platform, and we can use this platform to orient our analysis, which is very important before developing any mentoring program, to our interventions, can orient our practices, and can orient also the assessment, the evaluation of these practices. But let's try to understand a bit where human rights come from. And I will propose you a very simple exercise, which is a brainstorming. And I will ask you an open question. Which are the needs of a person, a migrant young person aged 19, for example, that arrives, that is living in another country, not in his own country? Which are his or her needs? What does this person need? If you prefer to write the answers in the chat box, you can do it. Otherwise, you are also invited to like share your keywords directly by talking. We touched a lot of aspects, and we could say more or less that if this young person had all these needs met, she or he would be at least happy, or but let me share some reflections that we normally share when we do this exercise. Are these needs very different from our needs, from the needs of a normal person or an adult. I mean, I don't think so. Any person needs food or friends or financial safety net, possibilities, and even gigabytes nowadays. But what can maybe change is the modality of response to these needs. But all of us, also mentors, for example, need such aspects. And what the human rights approach is suggesting is to recognize them all and evolve them into rights. Human rights derive from a recognition, actually, of a broad range of human needs and potentials, not only the needs, but also the potentials of a human being. So human being need food, shelter, need protection, safety, and all these things have evolved to a status of rights. And human rights can be understood as a collective ethical imperative that we have set into our legal frameworks, but that we can use from a multidisciplinary perspective for different ends, and not only from a legal perspective. We can use it for education, for social intervention, for reform, policy reform, and also from different disciplines. So it could represent a platform that suggests as a common languages between and among different disciplines. But it is important to underline that the recognition of needs is very important and is not alternative to the recognition of rights. But it's equally important also to consider the difference, what this paradigm shift implies. And now we have here a table that shows which differences there are between a needs-based approach and a rights-based approach. When we talk about a needs-based approach, we talk about working towards outcome goals. And instead, talking about a rights-based approach means working towards outcomes and process goals. For example, if this guy, 19 years, is here, doesn't know very good the territory, the context, he has to go to a place and he doesn't know how to reach that place, let's put that I am a mentor, I can say, okay, I will bring you to that place with my private car and we will go. Or I can say, okay, I will show you how you can go by your means, no? So I will show you how to buy a ticket for a bus ticket, and I will accompany you to that place by using the public transportation, for example. So next time you will know how to do it by your own. So the process is also important, not just the final outcome. Or the needs-based approach, for example, emphasizes meeting needs. Rights-based emphasizes fulfilling rights. The right to be respected, protected, and fulfilled. This means reinforcing capacities, and this means the need to involve also the duty bearers, those who are responsible for those rights to be respected. For example, public officials. The needs-based approach recognizes needs which do not imply duties or obligations as valid claims. And this is extremely discretional. I can wake up in the morning and say, okay, I am recognizing that you need this and I will satisfy your need. But next day I can wake up and I will not maybe recognize your needs. So it's very discretional. And instead, a rights-based approach recognizes that rights always implies duties and obligations of the state and of the persons. And this means that we can identify rights gaps and we can claim for their respect. We do have human rights mechanisms allowing us to claim for our rights. Our needs rights approach means meeting needs without empowerment. It is like if the person was recognized as the passive subject, and instead a child rights, a rights approach recognizes that rights can only be realized with empowerment, and therefore recognizes the person as an active subject of rights. And this could be like, the implication could be to support young people's agency. Then the needs approach ranks needs in a hierarchy of priorities. And instead, a rights-based approach considers the indivisibility and interrelatedness of human needs and rights, the interdependence of everything. And this means adopting also a holistic understanding of the person and considering all the aspects that compose the life of a person. A needs-based approach accepts charity or philanthropy as the driving motivation, and a rights-based approach states that charity is insufficient and biased motivation. So, for example, we are proposing to consider mentoring as an exercise of civil positioning and active citizenship, not just as a charity or something that we do because poor community needs our help. So we involve narrow sectorial projects, the needs-based approach, which of course links to brings to a fragmentation of interventions, and instead a rights-based approach involves intersectorial and holistic projects and programs. And this could also mean that mentoring programs could be built on the assets of the local context. So use what we have in the local context and reinforce it. A needs-based approach focuses on immediate problems with little emphasis on policy, and rights-based approach focuses on social, economic, cultural, civil, and political context, and is policy-oriented. Tries to recognize and analyzes root causes of phenomena. And many times we have seen these days, and in the different interventions in the summit, we talk about social exclusion, about power dynamics, privilege. We have to ask ourselves about the causes, where these phenomena come from, and how we relate to them. So this is the kind of approach that we think could inspire mentoring practices. And this is what the difference between a needs-based approach and a rights-based approach. But how can we build the human rights, let's say, map that we were talking about? And I will propose you, Alba, a kind of diagram or map here, yeah. As we so we have seen that these needs that we shared in the brainstorming can be emancipated into rights, and these are of different nature and could be classified in different ways. But we will propose one possible way of classifying them in order to build up a framework that can be used analytically and operationally. We normally use the metaphor of the maps and the territories. So we equip ourselves with maps that then can help us in connecting with the territory and getting oriented. And of course, if the territory changes, the map should change. This is the connection between theory and practice. So this map, which is theoretical, can be applied in our practices. And this map is divided into 4 clusters. The first one refers to basic needs, which are all those needs, all those rights that refer to the primary biological needs of human life. We have here shelter, food, clothes, health. All of them were, I think, in our brainstorming. We have then development. Here we can put all the rights that are related to the cognitive, educative, emotional, social, and cultural development of the person. Here we can life project, when we were someone was saying possibility to meaningful life, no? The life project, the awareness of our life project, work, education, friendship, spirituality, identity. We have protection, the third area, which are all aspects deriving from the particular vulnerabilities of a person in relation to her particular situation. And here the notion of protection includes also the levels of prevention, rehabilitation, and empowerment. Some keywords could be safe place, cultural mediation, listening, professional skills, access to social services, to support services, to justice. And the last area is participation, which includes all the rights linked to the possibility of expressing one's identity in the surrounding environment and exercising one's own competencies in determining one's current and future condition. And this is the, let's say, the revolutionary aspect of the rights-based approach, participation, recognizing every person as an active subject. And here some keywords are documents, information, social orientation, legal assistance, language, affiliation to associations or social initiatives, ability to make decisions. So if we took the needs that emerge in our brainstorming, I'm sure that we could place them in this map, which helps us in qualifying a holistic consideration of the person. Even if we are involved in a very specific kinds of mentoring, such as, for example, labor-focused or educational, we cannot avoid to consider all the other dimensions and aspects of the mentee's life so as to contextualize our specific action in a comprehensive framework that responds to the holistic vocation of mentoring. For example, in the case of social mentoring, we cannot consider just one aspect of the mentee's life, for example, education, without considering that a change in the educational dimension of the mentee's life will affect also other aspects such as access to work or socialization, self-esteem, maybe mental health as well, or participation into the community, for example. These are some examples. But we have at the same time to consider that all the other life dimensions affect the one that we are specifically working in. So the human rights proposes this possible map to help considering all these aspects in our mentoring programs. But if we go to the next slide, we see this one, yeah, excuse me, that there is an important evolution of this map, which is the ecologic approach applied to human rights. If you look at this other image, you can see a person in the middle. The centrality of the person is always the first consideration. Then we have the 4 dimensions for the survival, development, protection, participations, and a series of concentric circles that represent the different levels of the context from the micro to the macro. And this highlights the importance of considering the different levels of the context and their relation with the person's situations. The impact that these different levels, from the micro to the macro, have in the life of a person. If we consider the relation between the person and the context, we will be able to find sources of support, but also potential vulnerabilities. And the rights ecology suggests, but because as we know, we are, I saw a talk today in the framework of the summit, and someone was saying, and we always say this too, that vulnerability is not a sickness or is not a characteristic of the person. Vulnerability is the result of the relation between the person and the context. If I am from another country and I cannot talk the language, I will be more vulnerable. But it's not that I cannot learn, or it's not that I have a personal, let's say, problem. It's that the context relates with my story in a way that causes a fragility. Okay, so the rights ecology suggests that stronger links between each system of circles result in people, in young people, for example, having healthier connections through positive relationships with their human and natural environment, which leads also to greater resilience and healthier individual and community development outcomes. Conversely, in situation of social or political breakdown, for example, in which these supportive and protective mechanisms are damaged, let's say, the person or the young person, his personal development will be negatively impacted. So in the case of regenerations, for example, we are addressing young people who came alone from another place and therefore have no adults of reference in the context where they are living now. Mentoring becomes a measure to reestablish a function that normally is developed by the family. And of course, this presence of the mentor in this case can reduce young people's exposure to vulnerability or to social exclusion. So, yeah, the other proposal of this regeneration hypothesis is that mentors and young people can also become change makers in relation to the different levels of the context. For example, by denouncing rights violations, by soliciting or creating new opportunities in the local network, representing a rights-based cultural approach in their community, so it's also possible to have an impact to the context. So this interconnection among all the different elements respond to a systemic vision that is needed to avoid fragmentation and to consider not only the different places of this map, but also the relation among them and how to reach them. This is a bit our framework of reference, our theoretical proposal. Of course, these slides, we will try to make them available after the session. And now, if you are not so tired or if things have been clear enough, we would like to propose you with a practical exercise. And we can read together the case study. Ahmed turned 18 years 2 months ago, and he's about to start a mentoring relationship. He arrived in Barcelona from Morocco without adult references a year and a half ago. He's a very quiet boy, always saying yes to the proposals that professionals make to him. He has a small network of friends based on peers from his hometown. He has an average level of oral Spanish, although he has difficulties on writing it. He has no family or adult references in the territory. He has a good relation with his family in Morocco, and they ask him to send them money often. As a minor, he lived in a shelter and 2 educational facilities. He is currently living in an assisted apartment, but he doesn't know when his stay will end. As a minor, he got a residence permit without a work permit. Within a few months, he will have to renew his card. Currently, he is studying professional studies of electricity. Occasionally, he works in the construction in the underground economy. The questions are, for group 1, which could be the objectives of a mentoring relationship in relation to the needs rights dimension? So you have, if you remember, basic needs, development, protection and participation. Could you try to identify at least one objective for each one of these 4 areas? The other question is, for the group 2, which could be the impact of a mentoring relationship for the mentee, so for Ahmed, for the mentor, and for the context? And here as well, you can use the map that we share, so the 4 areas, and consider the different levels of the context, family, community, policies, and so on. Hello again. And we will ask the reporter of group 1 to briefly share the reflections or results of the question 1.
Well, we did an introduction round, so we just had a small part to start to talk about the question, but in short, I think, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, Maya said that trust is the basic to achieve all those different dimensions. So we cannot talk about how to incorporate all those dimensions without achieving a trust with the mentee in this case, in which I added that in order to achieve that trust, we should also think about the cultural background of a student or a mentee in how to achieve the trust. So in some cases, trust can be achieved by, let's say, your know-how of a certain topic, your expertise. And in some cases, trust can be won by showing interest in their background, their families, their position, their experiences, and that way showing loyalty and gaining trust, and after which you can talk about development, participation, etc. So that's what we mean by gaining that trust, and we just got till that one point. So I have the trust in my team that we would have gotten further, but we didn't have the time.
Yeah, that I know that we had not enough time. But many times it's interesting this aspect of the trust. But many times we know our mentor or our mentee, and we have to set objectives without this trust. Okay, so it is also interesting to reflect on how this map could orient us in establishing objectives when the trust hasn't been developed yet. Next time. And the second group that responded to the question, which could be the impact of the mentoring relationship for the mentee, the mentor, and the context? Who is going to very briefly present us the results? Okay, Celia?
Yeah. So we looked at the impact on Ahmed, improving his language, help with managing the bureaucracy around his work permit and other administrative aspects, confidence, his own confidence, and connection to his environment, understanding a new culture, a new city, and changing his context by getting to know it better. And then the impact on the mentor, to learn about another culture and Ahmed's family situation, and to experience the culture, his own culture, her own culture and city through fresh eyes, through Ahmed's eyes. And then the impact that they both have on the context is that they're creating a new context together through their shared relationships, shared networks. They're having an impact on each other's peers, which can lead to lots of possibilities, including having more mentors and mentees. And there's the potential to contribute to systems change by having an understanding of how somebody like Ahmed feels when they come to a city, how the systems support him or don't support him, and how that can be changed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Celia. Yeah, this was a bit the sense of the exercise, to link all the different let's say, persons involved or levels involved, and try to hear in your answers, we can see represented all the different needs/rights that we saw during the brainstorming and afterwards. So yeah, it was the attempt, no? So we have now, we will conclude now. We don't have more time. I just wanted to leave you with a last slide where you can find useful links and references to human rights instruments. Of course, this here, the first one is the core international human rights instruments and their monitoring bodies. We have different specific instruments. We have the UNCRC, the one related with the rights of the child, but we have the rights of women, rights of migrant people, and so on. And they can really be used to orient and qualify also our specific programs. It was a pleasure to have you here, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of the summit. And I thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, Alba has this